My name is Dorothy. I'm 68 years old, and I've kept company books for over 40 years. Not metaphorically, not loosely. I mean, I have sat at a desk with a green-shaded lamp, a cup of black coffee going cold beside me, and a ledger or a spreadsheet, or both, and I have accounted for every dollar that moved through a business since 1984. I have a small black notebook I carry in my purse at all times, a mead composition book, the kind with the black and white speckled cover. And when the pages are full, I start a new one, date the cover, and put the old one on the shelf in my study. I have 14 of them. When something important happens in my life, I write it down. Date, time, who said what number was on the table. My coworkers called me the archivist. My husband, Gerald, before he passed, used to say I could reconstruct any conversation we'd ever had going back to 1981. He called the notebook my little black book of truth. I never thought I would need to use it on my own son. His name is Kevin. He is 38 years old. He is a senior director at a technology consulting firm based here in Columbus, Ohio, and he has done well for himself, which I am proud of, genuinely proud of, because I remember the years before the promotions and the marble countertops, the years when he was eating ramen and sleeping on a futon and calling me to ask how to reconcile a checking account. He has a beautiful wife named Melissa, 35, with dark hair and a sharp sense of humor that I admired for a long time, and they have a baby daughter named Rose, 14 months old. Rose has Kevin's eyes, which means she has Gerald's eyes, and she has a way of looking at you like she is making a very careful assessment, which she gets from me. I would do anything for that child. I want to be clear about that before I tell you anything else. What happened this past spring had nothing to do with Rose, and everything to do with what Kevin and Melissa decided to do to me in her name. Last March, Kevin called me on a Tuesday evening while I was doing the dinner dishes. He said he and Melissa had been doing a lot of thinking. He said they were really struggling with the cost of daycare. He said I was so lucky to be at the age where I could start to slow down. He said that to me, a woman who drives herself 20 minutes to work every morning in Columbus, balances the books for a regional logistics firm, has her annual review meeting in 2 weeks, and has 2 years left until full retirement at 70 with every benefit intact. I set the phone down on the counter. I dried my hands on the dish towel. I opened the black notebook to the next clean page and wrote down the date. I wrote what he said. I wrote 3 question marks next to the word struggling. And then I thought about the blue folder in my filing cabinet, the one with the loan cosign documents from 3 years ago, the ones that showed me exactly what Kevin earned and what he spent and what he thought I didn't remember. I didn't say anything that night. I didn't need to. I went to the kitchen table, sat down, opened my laptop, and started a spreadsheet. If you've ever been made to feel invisible after a certain age, as if your needs stopped mattering the moment your children had children of their own, as if the years of work and sacrifice and showing up were just the setup for a favor you were now expected to deliver without complaint, I want to hear from you. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Tell me if you've been there. You are not alone in this. Let me take you back to the beginning. I was born in 1958 in a small house in Lancaster, Ohio, 45 minutes southeast of Columbus. My father was a machinist at the Anchor Hocking glass plant. My mother kept the household books, which meant she had a spiral notebook of her own on the kitchen counter, and she could quote you the grocery bill from any month of any year going back to 1952 without pausing. She never had a career, not in the formal sense, but she understood money the way some people understand music, by feel, by pattern, by what sounds wrong before you can say why. I inherited that from her. When I started my career at 26, I bought my first composition notebook and wrote down every transaction I touched. I moved to Columbus in my early 30s. Gerald and I raised Kevin and his younger sister Claire in a yellow house on a quiet street in the Clintonville neighborhood. After Gerald passed 11 years ago from a cardiac event, very sudden, very final, I kept working. I kept saving. I kept tracking. I didn't do it out of fear, though the fear was there sometimes, late at night, in the first year after he was gone. I did it because I believed that a woman who knows her numbers is a woman who cannot be told a story that doesn't add up. Kevin grew up watching me do this. He knew about the notebook. He knew about the spreadsheets. He used to ask me to help him build his college budget, and I sat with him at this same kitchen table, in this same house where I still live, and I showed him how to match income to spending, how to project forward, how to plan for the thing that hasn't happened yet, how to see around the corner. I thought he had learned it. About 3 years ago, Kevin and Melissa were buying their house. A lovely place, 4 bedrooms, in a newer development about 20 minutes outside the city. They were stretching, financially, reaching just a little past what their savings could cover. Kevin asked me to co-sign a line of credit to help bridge the gap. I said yes, because I loved him and wanted to help. And because I am who I am, I read every document before I signed my name. I saw his income, I saw the most recent tax return, I saw the salary line from his employer. I made copies of the relevant pages and put them in a blue folder in the bottom drawer of my filing cabinet. I didn't think about them again for a long time. In the fall of 2025, Kevin was promoted. He posted about it on LinkedIn with a photo. Excited to step into this next chapter as Senior Director of Client Solutions. He looked very happy. He was wearing a watch I didn't recognize. Not the Seiko he'd worn for years, the one I gave him when he got his first real job, the one with the small scratch on the bezel he always said he was going to get fixed and never did. This was something heavier, silver, broad-faced, the kind that catches light when you move your wrist. I liked his post. I thought about the watch. In early March of 2026, Kevin came to my house on a Saturday afternoon. Melissa and Rose came too. It was a cold, bright day, the kind Columbus gets in early spring, where the sky is almost aggressively blue and the ground is still frozen, and the light through the living room window was very clear. Rose had just started walking. She was everywhere, pulling books off the lower shelves, trying to pick up my reading glasses, batting at the hanging leaves of the pothos plant by the window with a delighted seriousness. I made coffee. We sat in the living room, and after about 20 minutes of ordinary conversation, Kevin sat forward with his elbows on his knees, which is a posture I have known since he was 9 years old and about to ask for something. And he asked me when I was planning to retire. I said I was planning to retire at 70, as I had always planned. My pension would vest fully at 70. My Social Security benefit was worth significantly more if I delayed past 67. The difference, by my calculation, was not trivial. 2 more years of work, and the math was simply better. He nodded slowly, the way a person nods when they are waiting for you to finish, rather than listening to what you're saying. He said he and Melissa had been talking, and they were really struggling with childcare costs. He said that Rose needed consistency, needed someone who knew her. He said a daycare environment for a baby this age was not ideal. He said, and I wrote this down afterward, that he felt like family should help family. Then Melissa turned to me from the armchair across the room. She smiled, a warm, practiced smile, and she said, "You're so lucky, Dorothy. You're at that age where you can slow down. It would be so good for you and for Rose." I looked at her. I looked at Kevin. I looked back at Melissa. I asked, very quietly, what the current cost of daycare in their neighborhood was running. Kevin waved his hand. He said, "Oh, it's astronomical. These places charge anywhere from $2,000 a month. It's just not sustainable for us right now." I didn't say what I was thinking. I smiled and said I would think about it. I noticed the kitchen behind him as I stood up to get more coffee. The countertops were new, white marble, or a high-grade composite meant to look like it. The cabinets were a matte forest green I had never seen there before, not 6 months ago when I brought a Christmas lasagna to their house. The faint smell of paint still clung to the baseboards. I made a note of that too. I drove home. I put my key in the door. I stood in the hallway for a moment, with my coat still on. That same evening, my daughter Claire called. She said Kevin had called her that afternoon after leaving my house. He told her I was seriously considering early retirement to help with the baby. He had made it sound decided. He had told her I was on board with the idea. Claire said, "Mom, I don't know what he's doing. I tried to tell him you hadn't agreed to anything. I'm so sorry." Her voice had an edge I recognized, the particular kind of frustration that comes from watching someone you love be treated as if they're too old to speak for themselves. I thanked her. I told her not to worry. I hung up. I took out the black notebook and wrote down what Kevin had said to Claire, and the date and the time. Then I went to the filing cabinet. I opened the bottom drawer. I found the blue folder. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time that night, not out of hurt, though I was hurt with the particular sharpness that only your children can produce in you, because no stranger can reach that part of you. Not only out of anger, though I was angry too, quietly and steadily, the way I get angry when numbers don't add up. I sat there because I needed to think clearly. I needed to be fair to Kevin, to consider whether I was missing something. And the only way I know how to be fair to anyone, including people who have hurt me, is to look at the actual numbers. 3 days later, on a Tuesday morning, I made phone calls. Not to Kevin, to daycare centers. I called 3 of the most well-regarded facilities in Kevin and Melissa's zip code. The first one, Bright Horizons, quoted me $2,100 per month for an infant spot. That was their premium full-time rate. The second center quoted $1,750. The third, a smaller family-run place with excellent reviews, quoted $1,680. I wrote all 3 numbers in the notebook. I wrote the names of the centers. I wrote the date and time of each call. Then I opened a new spreadsheet. I titled it 3 tabs. I gave it exactly 3 worksheets. Tab 1 was the simplest: daycare cost versus income. I used Bright Horizons, the most expensive option in the area, because Kevin had implied the cost was prohibitive, and I wanted to be generous in his favor. $2,100 a month. $25,200 per year. Kevin's salary on file at the time of the cosign 3 years ago was $245,000. His LinkedIn announcement described a senior director title, a promotion that in his firm's compensation structure typically carried a raise of 15 to 20%. That put his current base salary at a conservative estimate of $280,000 per year. That is $23,333 per month before taxes. $2,100 out of $23,333 is just under 10% of his monthly gross income. Not $1 in 10. I put that calculation in a cell by itself, and I highlighted it in yellow. Tab 2 took longer. I went back through what I knew. The new kitchen. Claire had mentioned months ago that Kevin and Melissa had redone the whole thing. It looked like a magazine spread. Based on what I had seen, the marble, the custom cabinetry, the recessed lighting that hadn't been there at Christmas, I looked up average costs for a full kitchen renovation in their area. $80,000 was a fair estimate, possibly low. The car in the driveway that Saturday was different from the one Kevin had driven before, a black luxury SUV. I looked up the lease rate for that model, around $1,200 a month. Melissa had posted photos on her social media from last summer, 2 weeks in Italy and Portugal. I recognized the style of the hotels from the backgrounds in the photos. I looked up the average cost for a comparable European vacation for 2 adults. $15,000 was conservative. I pulled up the blue folder and looked at the financial disclosure again. All of it, carefully, and I noted what the documents could support. Kitchen renovation, $80,000. Car lease, $1,200 per month, $14,400 per year. European vacation, $15,000. That was more than $100,000 in documented discretionary spending over the last 2 years. More than 4 full years of the most expensive daycare in their area. I put a note at the bottom of tab 2. It said, "These are not accusations. These are the numbers that exist." Tab 3 was the hardest to build, and the hardest to look at when it was done. I called Susan on a Thursday morning. Susan is a certified financial planner, a CFP, and I have worked with her for 6 years. She is not a person who softens numbers. She tells you what is true, and she expects you to work with it. I said, "Susan, I need you to run the figures on what early retirement costs me. Not 67, not 68 and a half. Retiring this spring, at 68. She was quiet for just a moment. Then she said, "Let me pull up your file." She called me back that afternoon at 4:30. She had done the full analysis. Lost pension vesting from leaving 2 years early, $62,000. 2 years of Social Security delay credit, the additional benefit I had earned by planning to claim at 70 rather than 68, gone. An estimated $118,000 in lifetime additional payments, based on my earnings record and life expectancy projections. Healthcare gap, the period between my employer plan ending and the supplemental Medicare coverage I would need to fund privately, because Medicare starts at 65, but my employer plan was better, and leaving it 2 years early meant 2 years of private supplemental premiums. $24,000. 401k growth loss over 2 years at current market rate, compounding forward, $136,000. Total, $340,000. Conservative floor, Susan said. Could be higher depending on markets and how long I lived. "Dorothy," she said, and her voice had a particular quality. "Who is asking you to do this?" I said, "My son." She said, "I see." There was a pause. "I'll email you the detailed breakdown," she said. I thanked her and hung up. I sat at the kitchen table with my hands flat on the wood, and I looked at the number I had just written in the notebook. $340,000. Then I opened the laptop and typed it at the top of tab 3, in a larger font, in red. Below it, I wrote each line item from Susan's analysis. And below all of that, I wrote one more line, the line that tab 3 was really about. It said, "If I retire now and exhaust my savings by 75, who pays for my care, and what does that cost them?" The instrument Kevin and Melissa had handed me to force the decision, the logic of financial need, was the same instrument that would expose what they were actually asking me to give up. I did not plan that. It simply happened when you let the numbers tell the truth. I closed the laptop and made a cup of tea and stood at the kitchen window for a while, looking out at the backyard where Kevin used to play, the big maple tree he used to climb, the wooden swing Gerald built when Kevin was 5 that was still there, the paint faded to almost nothing. I thought about how much I loved Kevin. I thought about it with full sincerity, not as a counterweight to the anger, but alongside it, because both things were true at the same time. I loved him, and I was not going to let him do this. A week after Susan's call, Kevin called to invite me to a Sunday lunch. He said the whole family was coming over to celebrate Rose's walking milestone. He mentioned that Claire would be there, and his cousin Thomas, and Thomas's wife, and Melissa's parents. He sounded cheerful, casual, the voice he uses when he has already decided something and is presenting it as an open question. I said I would be there. I said I'd bring pot roast and sweet tea. I hung up. I thought about the word celebrate. I thought about the 5 people he'd named, all witnesses, and about the last Sunday lunch at which family had assembled to discuss my future. Sunday morning, I woke at 6. The pot roast went into the slow cooker early because I was not going to arrive at that house without food. Not on a Sunday, not in this family. I made a pitcher of sweet tea, the way my mother made it, strong and barely sweet, over ice. I had my coffee at the kitchen table. I opened the laptop and went through the spreadsheet one more time, all 3 tabs, every number, every formula. Not because I thought I had made an error, but because I wanted to arrive knowing it the way I know the back of my own hand. I put the laptop in the canvas bag I use for larger items, the dark green one I've had for 15 years. I set the blue folder on top of it. I put on the navy cardigan with the brass buttons that I wear to things that matter. I drove to Kevin's house. It smelled like fresh bread when I walked in. Melissa had made a pecan pie. The baby was in her playpen in the corner of the living room, stacking the little colored plastic cups, knocking them down, stacking them again. Thomas and his wife were already there. Melissa's parents sat on the settee by the window. Claire was in the kitchen, looking at something on her phone with an expression I recognized as controlled worry. I set the pot roast in the kitchen. I hugged Rose. I said hello to everyone. I found a chair that faced the television on the living room wall. I set the canvas bag at my feet. The lunch was good. The pot roast was good. The pecan pie was good. We talked about ordinary things, about Thomas and his wife expecting a second child, about Melissa's mother's garden, about Rose's vocabulary, which at 14 months consisted mostly of emphatic consonants, and the word dat, which she applied to everything. I watched my son across the table, calm and engaged, and pouring wine for his guests, and I thought about how well he had learned to perform ease. He had not learned that from me. After the plates were cleared, and the pie was cut, and the baby had fallen asleep in her playpen with one small hand wrapped around a plastic cup, Kevin stood up. He said he wanted to address something important while everyone was together. He said it was a family matter. He said that he and Melissa had been under real financial strain with the cost of childcare, and that it had been weighing on them heavily. He said that family meant everything to him. He said that I had worked so hard for so many decades and that I deserved rest. He said, "Mom, we're asking you to think seriously about retiring a little early. Rose would have her grandmother every day. You'd have your family around you. We really need you to consider this." Melissa turned to me. She smiled. She said, "You're so lucky, Dorothy, that you're at that age where you can slow down." The third time. The same phrase. I waited one full breath. I looked at Kevin. I looked at Melissa. I looked at Claire, who was now looking at the tablecloth with the kind of stillness that means a person is holding themselves together. I looked at Thomas and his wife, and at Melissa's parents, all of them watching me, assembled as witness or pressure or both. I said, "Actually, I brought something too." I reached into the canvas bag and took out the laptop. I looked at Kevin and asked if I could connect it to his television. He looked at the laptop, then at Melissa, then back at me. He said, "Sure, Mom." The HDMI cable was in the side pocket because I had thought of that at 6:30 that morning. The screen on the wall came on. Tab 1. The spreadsheet filled the television. I said, "The most expensive daycare in your zip code is Bright Horizons. Their full-time infant rate is $2,100 per month. That is $25,200 per year. On an annual income of $280,000, that's just under 10% of your monthly gross, less than $1.10. Before I could consider altering a retirement plan I've had in place for 20 years, I needed to understand what the actual number was." No one spoke. I said, "I have a second tab." Melissa's hand tightened around the stem of her wine glass. Tab 2 came on. I did not editorialize. I read the line items in my regular voice, the voice I use when I am presenting a report to a board. Kitchen renovation, $80,000. Car lease, documented, $1,200 per month. European vacation, last summer, $15,000, which is a conservative figure. Total, more than $100,000 in documented discretionary spending over the past 2 years. More than 4 full years of the most expensive daycare in their neighborhood. The glass hit the table with a sharp crack. Melissa pushed her chair back and walked out of the dining room without a word. Kevin said my name, very quietly. I said, "There is a third tab." Tab 3. I read from Susan's breakdown. Lost pension vesting, $62,000. Social Security delay credit, 2 years, $118,000. Healthcare gap, $24,000. 401k growth, $136,000. Total, $340,000. Conservative. I looked up from the screen. I said, "You are not asking me to slow down. You are asking me to give up $340,000 in retirement security and become a financial responsibility to this family within 10 years. I want you to understand that number. Not for my sake, for yours." Melissa's parents were looking at their plates. Thomas was looking at the window. Kevin was looking at his hands, spread flat on the tablecloth, the way I had spread my own hands on the kitchen table when Susan called me, and I recognized the gesture without satisfaction. I closed the laptop. I said, quietly, the way I say things when I am most certain of them, "I will be here every Sunday. I will be at every birthday and every holiday and every Tuesday afternoon if you want to call. I love Rose more than I know how to say, but I'm not an unpaid employee, and I am not invisible just because I am 68 years old." Melissa came back for her purse and left through the front door. The guests began to find their coats. Kevin remained at the table. He did not speak. I stayed. I helped clear the dishes. I wrapped the leftover pot roast and put it in his refrigerator, because that is the kind of woman I am, the kind who brings pot roast and sweet tea and a spreadsheet to a Sunday lunch and clears the table afterward, because none of those things contradict each other. I kissed Rose's forehead while she slept in the playpen. I picked up the canvas bag with the laptop and the blue folder. I walked out to my car as the late afternoon sun was going flat and orange over the rooftops on the west side of the city. The story moved through the family the way stories do. Claire called me that evening to say she was proud of me and to tell me she was sorry she hadn't spoken sooner. Thomas texted Kevin something I never saw, but Kevin mentioned it later with a look I recognized as chastened. Melissa's mother sent me a card 2 weeks after the lunch. It said, "I should have said something before it came to this." I pressed the card into the black notebook between 2 pages. About 3 weeks after the Sunday lunch, Kevin called me in the evening. He said they had enrolled Rose in a daycare near their house. A good one, he said. She was settling in well. Then he said, "Mom, I know I handled this wrong." He didn't elaborate, and I didn't ask him to. I said, "I know, Kevin. I love you." I meant it. I work the 2 remaining years. I sit at the desk with the green lamp and the black coffee. I balance the books. I go to my annual review, and my colleagues ask about my retirement plans. And I tell them, 70, still, 2 years, as planned. I retire at 70 with my full pension vested, my Social Security at its maximum rate, my 401k exactly where it should be, every benefit intact. $340,000 still in my future, where it belongs. The following fall, I drove to Kevin's house for Rose's first birthday. She wore a tiny paper crown and ate cake with the focused determination of someone who has discovered something worth doing properly. I brought pot roast and sweet tea, because I always will. At some point during the afternoon, she crawled out of her playpen, across the living room floor, pulled herself upright on the handle of my canvas bag, and looked up at me with her grandfather's eyes. I picked her up. I held her in my lap while the family talked around us, and the light came in through the windows. And I thought that this specific weight in my arms, this specific moment, was worth more than anyone could put in a spreadsheet. But the spreadsheet still mattered, and I will keep it. There is something Kevin and Melissa tried to teach me that spring, without meaning to, that getting older is the same as becoming invisible. That once your hair is gray and your career is in its final chapter, your time becomes community property. That the years of work and precision and love and sacrifice should be redeemed now, on someone else's schedule, and you should feel grateful for the opportunity to be useful. They were wrong. I knew they were wrong before I opened tab 1, but the numbers said it more plainly than I ever could have.